Hey there, I'm Sara, a portrait and wedding photographer and your host for Wedding Secrets Unveiled. This is a podcast where we cut through the complexity of wedding planning, leaving you with everything you need to know directly from the industry experts. If you want to simplify your wedding planning while having fun, of course, you came to the right place. Join me while I guide you through your planning, starting from your engagement to your big day where you say, I do. After photographing for the past 19 years, I am sharing with you tips and tricks to cut through the excess noise because I believe from the moment you said yes, your planning experience should be a magical time in your life. Here you will find episodes that are fun, stress-free, and straight to the point with a fresh, honest take on the reality of what you really need to know about planning your perfect day. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Dan, and I'm going to be hosting today. And today we're going to be talking about different photography terms that you might not know. Some of them seem kind of interchangeable, but they mean different things, and it's something that people should know. So we're going to be going over editing versus retouching and photojournalistic approaches versus traditional approaches. So sit back, relax. I'm going to be interviewing Sara here. We're flipping the script, and enjoy.
Wow, we're mixing it up, Dan.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And we are talking about editing and retouching today. So, Sara, what's the difference?
Wow, I feel like a little on the spot here. I'm never on this side of it. So I just thought it was really important to kind of cover the difference between editing and retouching and what that is, you ask. I always tell our couples that we edit all the images, right? So what does that mean? Editing is going in, enhancing it, cropping, color, it's sometimes airbrushing. It's taking what we photographed and just making it printer ready and enhancing it. Retouching, that to me is almost like cosmetic surgery, right? With a click of a mouse. So a lot of times people say, oh, you can fix that in Photoshop. And like, I kind of sometimes want to cringe. I'm like, that's so much time.
Well, you say it's with a click.
Right. It is with a click. It's with a click. A lot of clicks.
A lot of clicks.
And a lot of training and a lot of understanding how to work the program. So, sometimes, how like people always think, oh, you make it look so easy. But you make it look so easy with the click of the mouse. But really what it is I tell people that retouching is cosmetic surgery. So, for example, if you have something in the picture and you want us as the photographer to remove it. So what I mean by that is a blemish, a flyaway hair, an exit sign, the man on the beach that's just hanging out on the beach when you're trying to do your wedding photographs. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is I tell our couples that if you want us to remove something out of an image, that is retouching. There is a difference between editing and retouching. And a lot of times photographers charge differently or extra for either one. So I just thought it was kind of important to kind of cover what the difference was with with the two of them.
Mm-hmm. In editing, you can also think of it as like taking the image and making it more like true to life. So the way your eye sees something is so different the way a camera can capture it. A lot of times, you can see outside of a window and the inside with your own eye, but a camera doesn't have the dynamic range to see outside a bright window and inside. So but also there's times where like creatively you can have like a silhouette or something like that. And that's where kind of making the image, like boosting the contrast, exposure, saturation, different colors to make them match as you go. Also, as you go through the day, the color temperature, which is something that people don't really think about, different.
And by the way, when you say color temperature, you mean like different. It's just for the listeners. When he says color temperature, he means like different light radiates a different temperature. So, for example, daylight has a different color hue than like your lamp in the room.
Right. So some cameras will have kind of the wrong color temperature as you're shooting, but you fix that later. So like if you really look at, I mean, I don't suggest staring at the sun or staring at a light bulb, but the daylight is actually a lot bluer than incandescent bulbs. Also, fluorescent light, those tubes can be kind of green, and like you don't really realize that there's like a greenness, like a slight greenness, and it's like, oh, I don't like that. And you can't really tell why, but if you, in, Lightroom or Photoshop, take down the greens a little bit, it, can alleviate that problem. Obviously, ideally, you'd want to get away from that, but,
And
it's
also,
always different.
too, like you said, that's the editing portion, is making sure that someone might look at the image, like you talked about iridescent balls. That happens a lot in the church. And they love the image, but they don't realize that we may have turned down the type of light or the color in the image. Also, too, like when we're photographing outside, if a cloud goes over the sun, that takes like 3 or 4 seconds, but we want to make sure that the picture without the cloud blocking the sun and the cloud with the sun all look the same. So that's all part of the editing portion.
Right. And ideally, you never want to have an exit sign in there. Unfortunately, even tents these days have to have an exit sign on every corner of a tent. You think like, I think we know where the exit of a tent is, but they're always there. And we always try our best to angle ourselves and stuff like that, but sometimes, unfortunately, it's right where something is happening. And obviously it'll look better as an image if maybe that exit sign wasn't there.
Right. And so obviously, like you talked about, when we shoot, we try to make sure that we angle ourselves to not put it in there. But if we remove that exit sign, that is the retouching portion. So I just thought it was like really important that people understand the differences. So when you are looking for a photographer, ask them what is included in their package. And, do they include editing? Do they include retouching? It's two totally separate things.
So, Sarah, we hear people say, we can fix that later. Oh, Photoshop that. And what are your feelings about that?
Oh, I just love that, Dan.
Yeah, right.
No, you know what? You said earlier, like, oh, it's a click of a mouse. Yes, it's a lot of clicks of the mouse, a lot of education and time and sitting behind the computer. And when you hear like someone say, oh, you can just Photoshop that later, as a photographer, I can tell you that kind of universally, it's like, ooh, it's like, oh no, that's like, it's a little hard to hear that, because that just means that now you are retouching a lot behind your computer. So again, it's really important to get a photographer that has the experience, that can make sure that things like that don't need to happen after. So for example, you talked about exit signs. How about the fact of asking the ladies to take their hair elastics off of their wrist? Or for you, I know a lot of times you ask the guys to empty out their front pockets in their phones, because the last thing you want to do is editing like phones or wallet bulges or keys. And so just, making sure that these things are happening prior. I mean, I know a lot of times when we work on the beaches, you can't help the fact that people are in the background, but maybe if you angle and work and do it right in frame, you don't need to retouch that.
But also that time compounds as you're going. So like, let's talk about like the formals. If you had a hair tie on, that's every single image you have to fix that in, where it could have just been fixed if you had the expertise to know that that's there, take it out. And like I said, it takes a couple clicks per image, but those add up real quick. Right.
And also too, a lot of times I hear our couples say, I don't like my arms, or I'm just bring up arms because I do hear that a lot, but there's always a pain point, right? That we all have, that there's something about, for example, I've heard people say to me, one of my bridesmaids is going to be pregnant, and I just want to make sure that we don't show that as much, because they don't want them to be different, I guess, in the line when they're lining up. Or I don't like the way my arms look, or, oh, I don't like my tattoo. I actually had a really weird one that the groom had a black eye on the wedding day, and I didn't even ask why, but that's retouching. But you can't do anything about a black eye, but yeah, you can. We just posed him differently. You try to use the left side of him more than the right side, or like if we know beforehand that someone is a little conscious about their arms, there's a way to pose them.
There's a way to pose them, yeah.
Like more about communication, right? I guess the whole point is like try to get it right in frame and just know that there's a difference.
And, it's always good. The top thing is communication. communicate with your photographer.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So, Sarah, I know that we hear a lot of couples say, oh, we're awkward in front of the camera. Oh, we don't know how to pose. And maybe I have a flaw that I don't want to accentuate. How do I pose that way? And honestly, a good photographer can pose you, know those types of things, keep it fun, and not even feel like you're being posed.
Right. Exactly. And also, too, a little bit of prompting is a more, at least what we do.
Yeah.
We definitely pose. Because like we're not full photo there. Okay, so let's back up for a second. Let's explain kind of what a photojournalistic photographer is versus a traditional photographer. And then, so Dan, like,
well, photojournalistic, style really came from, obviously like people going into certain situations and photographing them. A big part of being a journalist is not tampering with or, making the subject change at all. That's where you get all those great, often black and white photos of
like editorial.
Yeah, or like world-changing images are people, photographers going in to an area and just capturing what's going on. So in turn, the way the term has been used for, weddings and stuff like that is they are not going to change anything. It's just documentation, which is all well and good, but I always feel like you need to prompt, like Sarah was saying. You almost don't pose, but we know how to set up couples to have a nice little moment that is really fruitful for a bunch of, photos, basically.
Right. And in return, a traditional photographer is all poses and really takes in the traditional way of posing, the proper way of posing, putting you in the right light, the right angle, really taking, portraiture into a wedding day. So if you have a photographer that marries the two, then you can use the prompts and the posing and the very natural way of basically like a photojournalistic way of photographing to make sure that you get it right in camera. So you don't have to go back and do the retouching.
Yeah, and also when you have that photojournalistic approach in your back pocket there, you can snag really good candid moments, which you can never pose or make happen again. There's plenty of times where somebody's looking at somebody else and wiping their eyes or having a nice little moment, and those are so hard to recreate. Oh, do that again, and they're gonna like stare at you while they're doing it, and you're like, oh, not like that, but it's always good to wear both those hats.
Yeah, and I know originally we wanted to do this quick podcast miniseries for you all, talking about the differences between editing and retouching. But I think, Dan, you really just touched upon another great little tool to think about when you're looking for a photographer or thinking about your photography is the photojournalistic versus the traditional. It is nice to have a photographer that, we always joke around like we have eyes in the back of our heads, but it's to make sure that you put someone in the best possible position and the light for themselves. But also, too, it's like you said, like right behind you, there could be this cute little moment of like the flower girl holding hands with the ring bearer running away. And that's that photojournalistic quick capture.
So, yeah. So just talking about the photojournalistic, I know certain photographers say, oh, I'm just, photojournalistic. So to me, that means that photographer isn't going to pose or try to make anything happen. They're literally just going to be like a fly on the wall, which can be all well and good if that's what you're into. But I really feel like people like a little bit of, what you're doing and making sure that you look good, make sure that you turn certain ways, have a little fun moment. And I think just be aware that I think people that bill themselves just as photojournalistic photographers, I don't think do that at all.
Right. And then also, too, on the other side, people who say that they're very traditional, they don't take those extra moments. And, a lot about what we were originally talking about, making sure that, you're masking things in camera, that does take a little bit of thought and prompting prior, like making sure that, like we talked about, hiding an exit sign, making sure that the angle is that way. If you're or taking the hair elastics off your wrist, or making sure that someone's not holding their bouquet too high to cover the details of their dress, fluffing out the dress. Like, I have a lot of people ask us sometimes, there might be this beautiful photojournalistic image that we captured of a bride in a moment, and maybe her dress just wasn't just perfect in that one, but it was a moment that we were capturing, right? They'll say, like, oh, can you fix that? Well, that's retouching. But if there's times when we do a very traditional pose where we do fluff it all out and they have that mixture. So again, it's just kind of figuring out what the difference is. And I just wanted to make sure that we kind of covered these terms for people, you know?
Big time.
Well, thank you, Dan, for interviewing me on this week's episode of Wedding Secrets Unveiled. I think we helped listeners become one step closer to a stress-free wedding planning process and understanding the terminology in photography. What I will do for the listeners is I will put today's information on our episode show notes, which you can find on the blog and our website page at sarazarella.com/podcast. Thank you for listening to Wedding Secrets Unveiled. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to tell you something. I encourage you to check out our website at sarazarella.com. We love photographing while having fun, of course. Check out our podcast page on our website for our show notes, along with upcoming episodes with your local wedding experts. Listen in as we help you plan your epic event. And don't forget that you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening so you never miss an episode. I would so appreciate if you left a review for us on Apple Podcasts. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support, and let us know what you think. If you know any wedding experts that would like to be a guest, we have a link directly on our website where they can let us know. Thank you for listening.